to episode 188 of Board Game Blitz, a podcast about all things board games that you can listen to in less time than it takes to listen to almost any other podcast. Board Game Blitz is sponsored by Grey Fox Games. This week, we're talking about board game tournaments. First, we discuss a couple games we've played recently, Mahjong and Blueprints. Then, we talk about our thoughts on, and experiences with, playing board games in a tournament setting. And now, here are your hosts,
Ambie
and Crystal.
Before we get into the main episode, I'll have an announcement to make about Tabletop Live Network. TLN is this weekend. If you're listening to this the week that we release, TLN is this weekend, and I will be streaming on Saturday at 8 p.m. Pacific. The theme for TLN is travel-themed games. So I'm actually going to be playing a bunch of different free print and play games that are travel-themed. So come join us on our Twitch channel and join all the other wonderful streamers of TLN on Saturday if you like watching board games.
Yeah, we actually have a lot of cool streaming stuff with Tabletop Live Network coming up soon. In fact, before our next episode, we will have another stream as part of TLN during Gen Con on Saturday, August 5th. I'm going to be doing a live stream, not at Gen Con, but at home, but for part of TLN's Gen Con streaming. We're doing this cool thing where some of the TLN streamers are going to be streaming live from Gen Con, and some of us are going to be streaming at home for Gen Con. So it's kind of this neat thing that we're doing. Really excited about it. Not quite sure what I'm playing yet as of recording this, but definitely stay tuned on social media and all the usual places. And then I don't want to spoil anything, but we've got a pretty epic charity stream coming up later in August. If any of you know what tends to happen in August as far as Extra Life is concerned, you may have an idea of what's coming, but it's going to be really fun. So stay tuned for more information.
Yay! So recently I've been playing some Mahjong. I mentioned this a while ago, a couple years ago, that I had played Mahjong with my grandma a lot, but I never really played by the full rules because I never kept score. And Mahjong...
So Ambie, I'm going to interrupt you just briefly because I have to say, as a very white person who grew up in America, I grew up believing that Mahjong was the thing that Windows computers presented to me, which is most certainly not Mahjong. The tile matching game that was presented on Windows computers once upon a time is not Mahjong. And so if you were like me at one point and you thought that was Mahjong, that's not it. But if you watch the movie Crazy Rich Asians, you may have seen real Mahjong in action, and that is what Ambie played.
Yes. Yeah, so Mahjong is a rummy type game. If you don't know, rummy type games, it's like a card game, but Mahjong uses tiles. So there's different numbers and different suits and then some special tiles. And basically, the basic thing is you have 13 tiles in your hand and you draw one and discard one each turn. And then you're trying to get 4 sets of 3 and then a pair at the end to go out. And then the sets are either 3 of the same number and suit, 3 of a kind, or a straight of 3 in the same suit, 4, 5, 6 of the same suit. And then there's other special hands you can get too. But I had just played basic, you go out and then that's it, which is kind of like a rummy game with my grandma before. But recently my friend brought over his Mahjong set and he taught us some of the basic scoring rules that you can do. And he played that you have to get so many points in order to go out. Some hands won't give you any points at all. You have to get certain sets in order to get a point, and then some things give you 2 points, some things give you 3 points, some things give you 6 points, some that are harder and harder to get. And so instead of just trying to get a hand to go out, you have to get a hand that gets you points or else you can't go out. You can't win. So it's very different. And I thought it was a lot more interesting going for points. So my friend, he taught us the Hong Kong rules. There's actually lots of different versions of Mahjong. So the one I played, my grandma probably knew Hong Kong rules because she was from Hong Kong. And then there's also Japanese Mahjong, and then there's American Mahjong. But yeah, so we learned the Hong Kong rules, and then Japanese is similar to that in the scoring, but then there's a lot more types of scoring, I think. And then also Japanese is more strategic, so we're trying to learn Japanese Mahjong now because it has less of the luck. There's some cards in Mahjong, or some tiles in Mahjong that are just give you points just for drawing them. So
that's pretty lucky.
Silly. Yeah. But yeah, it was interesting playing. And then so we've started learning Japanese Mahjong. We haven't gotten a set yet. We're thinking about getting a set. But there's this video game, browser-based and app called Mahjong Soul. And it's pretty popular for people who play Mahjong. And that teaches you the Japanese Mahjong rules. Well, it kind of teaches you. It teaches you like some of the basic rules. And then as you're playing a game, it's be like, okay, you can win now. And like, oh, okay. And like sometimes you win, like you don't know exactly what you're getting. Like for example, usually you have sets of 3, but I knew there was something where you can score something where you only have pairs, but it has like restrictions to it. And I don't know what all of those are. But I'm like, I have a lot of pairs, so maybe I'm almost winning. And then the game's like, oh yeah, do you want to call the thing where you almost win? I'm like, oh, sure, yes. It's like, you need this tile. I'm like, okay, yes, I did win. So it kind of helps you, but then you might not also know what's going on. But yeah, I'm enjoying playing Mahjong and Mahjong Soul, and we're thinking of getting a Mahjong set.
It's interesting because obviously Mahjong is not, there are a lot of rummy style games that exist, both tiles and cards, but as you're describing Mahjong, I've never played real Mahjong, but it really, it feels like, I grew up playing Rummikub, and it feels like Rummikub likely borrowed a lot from Mahjong potentially,
Probably.
Since it is
it's
kind
like
of
a light
tiles.
Version. Yeah.
It really does. Yeah, it feels like kind of a simplified version because there's it's generally easier to start playing your tiles because you don't have to play them all at once. But I do know that there's also kind of differing rule sets to it. Like you can play where if you have any 2 sets of 3 you can start, or they have to total up to a certain number to be able to play them. Like if if you're playing with kids or adults, you can kind of mix it up that way. So as you were describing it, I was like, oh, yeah, it really it feels like more complex and interesting Rummikub. And don't get me wrong, I still love Rummikub, but it is pretty simplistic, and there is a lot of luck involved in just drawing the tiles.
Yeah, but a big thing of the Mahjong is the different scoring things. And also, if you draw the winning tile and you just win by that, usually it's hard to get a really good hand by that because that's just luck. And then everyone has to pay you their points. Lots of people gamble with Mahjong, so they can lose a lot of money. But if you discard the tile that lets someone else win, it's only you're paying them. So they could have a really good hand because you discarded that. So you're looking at what they've discarded, and you're like, oh, they might be going for this type of hand. So you have to kind of, as you get more and more into it, you have to know what hands they're going for and which ones score a lot of points and what not to discard. You play more defensively. So I'm not anywhere near that yet. But yeah, that's the whole scoring makes it so different than what we just played as a basic. When I was a kid, it was just basic, oh, I just have a hand, yay.
And that definitely isn't in Rummikub because you don't discard any tiles in Rummikub. You're just drawing and drawing and drawing until you can play them all, basically. So, yeah.
Yeah, so that was Mahjong and Mahjong Soul if you want to try it online.
Well, apparently both of the games that we're reviewing today are definitely not the new hotness. Which is funny that it is kind of Gen Con season. And, if for those who are connected online, there's a lot of buzz this time of year about the games that are coming out at Gen Con and all the new stuff. And Mahjong is obviously a very old game that's been around for quite some time. The game I'm talking about, not quite that old, but it is a decade old. This is a game that I've played a few times over the years, but I've never reviewed on the podcast. And I just played it again recently. So I wanted to talk about it because it's still in print, and I think it's a game others would enjoy, and that is Blueprints. Blueprints came out in 2013, originally published by Z-Man Games, designed by Yves Tourney, and it is a pretty simple dice drafting game where throughout the course of 3 rounds, players are given a blueprint card which has a little diagram on it which shows 6 dice in some little formation, and each round players are drafting dice one at a time from a general supply that's in the middle of the table and putting their dice onto their blueprint card behind a shield. At the end of the round, you score the different colors of dice in different ways. What's interesting is the scores you get from your dice pull your little tracker or your little bit up on the tracker, but that's not your score for the round. You don't actually get victory points based on where your thing ends up. You get an award based on if you are first or second in the round on the score tracker. So you only get a couple of points for being first or second. And then there are also some bonus conditions that you can meet that would also give you some bonus little, like, a small amounts of points. This is a very low scoring game. There's not like a ton of victory points at play here. And all of the dice score slightly differently. There's 4 different colors of dice. They're all basically considered different building materials for the purpose of building your little blueprint. The clear dice are glass, and they score the value of the pips on their top face just outright. So if a clear 6 shows up, it almost always gets taken immediately because that's 6 points right there. The orange dice score based on how many dice surround it. So basically touching its faces. Green dice score based on how many total green dice you have. The more you have, the more they score in total. And black dice score you based on how high they are in your structure. And what's interesting about that is none of the blueprint cards themselves have a structure higher than 3 levels, but you don't have to follow your blueprint card. So if you meet your blueprint's requirements, you get 6 points at the end of the round toward the score track, but you don't have to follow it. So in theory, if you can get black dice up on like the 5th level, the 6th level, you'll start earning like 8 points per die. But obviously if they see you taking black dice like that toward the end of the round, like people will potentially suss out what you're doing and try and stop you. Also, there's the added little hindrance that all of the dice you place, if you're placing them on top of another die, they have to be a lower value than the die below it, or the same value. So if you put a 4 on the bottom, nothing higher than a 4 can ever be placed above that die. So if you're trying to build a big stack, that can get tough quick depending on how many dice are in the pool and what their values are. So you just literally play through 3 rounds and then highest score wins. I will say this is relatively luck heavy in that it really depends on what dice come out as to what is even possible each round. But I love the tactile nature of dice, and I love messing around with them and building little structures with them. So it's satisfying to play. It's really quick to play. And it's easy to teach this one. So I think if you are like me and you like futzing around with dice and you like little games that let you mess around with them and that are relatively easy to teach, this is, like I said, it's a decade old, but I've played it a few times over the years, and I don't tend to think of it offhandedly, but every time it hits the table, every time I'm like, oh yeah, I really like this game. And so that's why I wanted to talk about it, because it impresses me every time. It's always fun, even if it is a little luck heavy. So yeah, that is Blueprints from Z-Man Games.
Cool. Yeah, I played this once, actually, with, I think, your friend Kathy at Dice Tower Con a long time ago.
Oh, nice. I just played it with Kathy here. She brought it over to my house, so.
Yeah, I was looking at my logged plays, and because I was like, that sounded kind of familiar. I don't remember much, but I looked at the logged plays, and it says that I kept building following the blueprints to the detriment of my score, but I wanted to build the blueprint, and I was having fun building the blueprints, so.
Yeah, it's interesting because that's where I think the luck really can, because at the beginning of the round, you kind of have to make a decision, right? You have to kind of be like, okay, am I going to follow the blueprint or am I not? And you have a big pool of dice to look at and see what's available, but every time a die gets drafted, a new one gets pulled from the bag and rolled. And so the supply of dice changes pretty dynamically throughout the course of the round. Each player is going to get a total of 6 dice. So there's a lot of shuffling of the dice. And even if there's a bunch of one color to start with, if the other players start taking that color, they disappear real fast. So it's hard to make a long-term plan in each round of this game. So yeah, if you're looking for something highly strategic, this one ain't it, but I still recommend it anyway. When it comes to topics to discuss on the podcast, Ambie, we've said before that we've talked about a lot of different things on the podcast. And often when you and I are thinking about what should we talk about in our next episode, it's sometimes hard to come up with something that we haven't discussed before.
Until today.
Yeah, you actually came up with something that we've never touched on, I think, at all, which in 187 prior episodes seems a little odd, but that is board game tournaments. And I will say this probably hasn't been a topic that's been at the top of our minds because it's not something that you and I participate in frequently.
Yeah, not anymore at least. But yeah, it did come to my mind because of Mahjong, actually. because in Mahjong Soul you can play like ranked and stuff, and I'm like scared to do that. But yeah, so I was thinking, oh, and then there's like board game tournaments and stuff too that like I haven't gone to, but I know they exist.
Oh yeah, at Dice Tower West for a number of years. I think Envoy Double Exposure, the same company that does a lot of the play to win games, has also been hosting, I don't remember what they call it. It's something like the National Azul Championship. Like it sounds very official, and I don't like. I think it's one of those things where you just declare it and it is. Like I don't, there's.
I guess there is the strike tournament we've gone to.
Oh, you know what? Yeah. We can definitely talk about that.
Because, my husband Toby has been like, every strike tournament he's participated in, he's won. All 2 of them.
Yeah, I mean, that's still something. But yeah, like they host Double Exposure. Envoy has hosted tournaments at conventions in a lot of different places. And then last year was the very first World Series of board gaming here in Las Vegas. And they're doing it again this fall here in Las Vegas again. And, I think their first year, there were some little hiccups to work out. As first year for any event, that's going to be the case. But it really feels like they're trying to build that into kind of a prestige board gaming competition event. And it's neat because it's not, just simple, easy to play games. Like there's some very complex, heavier board games that are in the mix. And so it's definitely clearly aimed toward hobby gamers who really love, deep, crunchy board games.
Yeah. So that one, I think it's kind of weird because you have to play like 16 different games. So it's like a best all around kind of board gamer at those 16 games. But there's also another competition thing, the WBC, the World Board Game Championships, I think that happens every year. And that one, I think they have competitions for each game. Maybe not all the games in existence. I mean, not maybe. Definitely not all the games in existence. But I think they have like games like the competition, the Agricola competition or something, or like other games. They have lots of games. And so it's just like competing in that specific game. And then you have tournaments with that. So people go to that as well.
Yeah.
Not me, but people.
It's interesting because those different events might appeal to different types of people, right? Like there are some people who put their heart and soul and everything into a single game. Like this is their game. They love it. They know it inside and out. They play it a lot. And that is the thing that they love and do and would potentially compete at. And then there are people who I think really love the ability to do the kind of the all around, more well-rounded, like, oh, I'm not, the absolute best at any one game, but I'm pretty decent at a bunch of games. So like what the World Series of Board Gaming is doing is maybe more for them. Yeah. Then you've got people like me who are like, I don't think I'm good enough at any one game or all of those games. So I have no idea how I would do in an event like that, because I know I don't know all the games, at least right now. I assume I would learn them beforehand, but I wonder how many people in the competition actually know how to play all 16 games or have played all of them before more than once. Well,
it seems like it's probably easy to have played all of them, but like be good at all of them. That's different. Or like,
oh yeah, that's
no strategies to all of them. But you're like, I think you're pretty decent at games.
What's funny is I tend to be pretty good at my first play of a lot of games. I don't think this speaks highly for my intelligence, but I get things quickly. I pick things up very quickly. And so when I'm playing a new game, I think often I can pick things up, like let's say it's new for everyone at the table, right? I think I can pick things up a little faster than the average person, which gives me an edge in first gameplay. I think over time, I tend to be a little less good at games than some other people. So I think that's why I tend to win games the first play more often. And then as I get to know the game better, I start losing because generally the people I'm playing with also know it better. And now they've caught up to me and now they can beat me.
Yeah, I'm that way too. Like Toby's the opposite. So like when we're learning a game, Toby, it takes him longer to like understand what's going on, but like I figure it out and then I usually win. And then like later on after we play multiple times, then he like gets it and then he gets really good at it. And I
think Dan is the same way. Literally, I think Dan is the same way. Yeah, he won't necessarily get it right away, but once he gets it, he'll kick my booty.
Yeah. But I did used to participate in tournaments back in 2014, I think.
Netrunner?
Yeah, Android Netrunner.
I figured that might be it.
Yeah. And this was before the podcast, right? So
Yeah.
Toby and I would go to Netrunner tournaments. So that year we did I think we did the 10x10 challenge.
Shout out to our friend Sarah Reed, who came up with the 10x10 challenge a number of years ago. Go check out her and her husband Will's YouTube channel, Rolling with Two. It's awesome.
Yeah, so we did the 10x10 challenge. We also said we weren't going to buy any new games except for Android Netrunner expansions. That was excluded. So we didn't buy any new games that year except for the Android Netrunner expansions. And then we also did a lot of Android Netrunner tournaments. And we went to all the tournaments at our local store, and the person who worked there knew us and would always talk to us about Netrunner. And so that was cool. And Toby was better than me generally. And he knew the cards better than me and would build the decks, and I didn't like building the decks, and I just liked playing it. But when we did a draft once, so Android Netrunner is a card game, kind of like Magic the Gathering, where you build a deck beforehand and bring it in and then play with that. But a draft is where you don't have a deck. You just go in and then they open up random cards and then you draft the cards. You each pick card and then pass it to the next person, and that's how you make your deck. So I did that, and then I actually did really well in that one. So when you don't know the deck ahead of time, I guess that's also kind of learning a new game, kind of, right?
Yeah, that makes sense, right? You're able to on the fly figure out what you can do with those, whereas other people that don't have their security blanket deck with them, right?
Yeah. I mean, Toby actually won the draft too, but we didn't play each other. We got first and second just because he won because of strength of schedule. He just happened to get first place because of who he played against. But I think I would have beaten him if I'd played against him. So
I think you would have beaten him too, even though I technically don't know.
Yeah. He gave me the playmat for the win.
Nice.
But yeah, that's the only time we've been competitively into tournaments for board gaming. Because a lot of times I like playing for just fun, and it got very stressful because with tournaments we had to keep up with everything. And with Android Netrunner, which is a living card game, new cards kept coming out, so we had to keep buying those and keeping up with what's going on and what decks people are building and how to counter those decks.
The meta.
Yeah, the meta. So when you're playing a game for a tournament, especially a card game like that, you have to just keep up with everything, and it gets very tough. And we skipped one cycle of cards, and then we were just behind. So we were okay, now we're not doing tournaments anymore, because once we just stopped for one time, we're way too far behind and just stopped forever.
Yeah, those types of games, obviously Magic the Gathering included, definitely tend to be lifestyle games for a lot of people. Mm-hmm. And my ex-husband played Magic the Gathering competitively and always tried to get me to play with him. And I would play casually with him, but when he would, suggest that I get into it more, it's not that I disliked the game Magic the Gathering, but I kept telling him, I said, at this point in Magic the Gathering's life, for me to even become semi-decent at it, there is too much for me to learn. There's too many cards that exist, too many metas, too many decks, too many things. And yes, technically you could play certain formats like Commander, or you can do a cube or whatever else where there's only a set number of things in it. But if I was going to play Magic, I would want to play Magic, right? I would want to do all the things. And I knew that I would not have the time nor the brain power to do that. And so I just decided to never get into it. And I'm glad that I did that, and I don't regret it. And and truly 1v1 card games typically aren't really my jam anyway. That's not a style of game that I tend to gravitate toward. And tournaments really aren't something that immediately appeal to me either. Similarly to you, I tend to play games for the fun of it. Don't get me wrong, we all enjoy winning a game, right? Winning can be very fun, but I can be a very emotional person. My emotions can be very strong in all different directions. I've become much better as an adult at self-regulating those emotions, but when you put me into a situation like a tournament where there are stakes on the line, I think it is going to be more stressful and anxiety-inducing for me, and it's going to make it harder for me to regulate those emotions potentially. So I think that's possibly why I tend to shy away from those types of things. things. Not to say that I'm unwilling, like I would definitely be down to play in something like, you know, the World Series of Board Gaming, but I think I would definitely have to go in with, like, I know there are people in those tournaments who get really intense. Like if you, you know, do one tiny thing that they perceive as wrong, they will kind of go off the rails. And like people are very strict about certain things, and I would really have to go in with a laid back attitude of, this is just a fun activity. If we happen to do well, that's a bonus, right? Like, because otherwise I feel like I'd have a bad time.
Yeah. And then like multiplayer tournaments is very different than 1v1 tournaments. Like a lot of tournament games that I think of would be 1v1, like chess. I don't like get into chess because of the same thing like with Magic. Like chess has been around for many years, and there's just so many things you have to learn to be competitive in chess. But like just playing chess with someone else who knows the same amount as you, it can be fun. But like it's just when you think of chess, you think of, oh, you have to learn all these openings and stuff. Like because that's what they do.
I feel like I've told this story somewhat recently on the podcast, so apologies if that is the case, but you reminded me that technically when I was in middle school, I was a tournament board game player because I was in a group called Strategizers. Yeah, and we went and competed against other middle schools. And I think I told the story where everyone avoided chess because it was the longest to play of the 8 games that we were, and you were required to play every game at least once. You could play games as many times as you wanted, but you had to play each one at least once. So everyone was like, oh, chess, because it took the longest.
But yeah, I also, if I'm playing a tournament, it gets a lot more serious, and I feel like I have to learn the game really well or like get super into it, and it feels more like a chore, I think, for me. That's why I don't like tournaments as much. I think the same thing happened with sports. Like when I did organized sports, I didn't like it as much as when I just play pickup games with my friends or something. I didn't like having to practice. I didn't like having to practice and then like be all super into it. I also didn't like, I don't like people that much. So there was the whole...
That's funny because I was thinking, I was like, I mean, I played like in the city's softball league up until high school, and I was like, I enjoyed it, even though like, but I was like, oh, I do like people, so
yeah. So the people might have been more the reason than the practicing and organized part, but like, I guess I had to practice with people. That's.
Ooh, here's a fun trivia question. I'm gonna see if our listeners can guess what position I primarily played when I played softball. Technically, there were 2 positions that I rotated between, so I'll take either as a correct answer. So if you're listening to this, go to our Discord into the show discussion channel and guess what position I played when I played softball. And at some point in maybe the next week, I will post what the actual answer is. I'm curious to see what people will guess. I just, it's one of those fun social experiments.
You can guess for me too, but I don't remember what my primary position was because I had a few.
So was it softball for you as well?
Well, I played a lot of sports. I played softball, basketball. I mean, so I played a lot of different sports through elementary school, and then what did I play in middle school? I
feel like a horrible person because the first thing that entered my head was, maybe you were shortstop because you're kind of short. Like, that doesn't make any sense. That's not, like, you don't have to be a short person to play shortstop, but that is what entered my head. Oh.
I'm like average height. Actually, I'm a little above average.
Well, yes, you're shorter than me.
Yeah, I'm shorter than the tall people who played basketball.
Yeah.
And I don't remember my position for that. I don't think I did any teams on the school in middle school. Oh, I did like track and field, I think, and cross country. And then in high school, I did tennis.
In high school, I was way too busy with marching band, choir, and drama. I had no time for sports.
I quit band for
marching band, definitely a sport. Yeah. And anyone who wants to argue with me, bring it on, because we were out there in the heat of Missouri summers marching all day and like...
Did that count for PE?
No, did not.
It didn't? Oh, wow.
Nope. But we were one of the top-rated marching bands in the Midwest when I was there. And actually, since I've left, my high school's marching band joined BOA, Bands of America, which is like super competitive.
Wow.
Yeah, so I think they've gotten even fancier since I left, but I digress.
Well, I mean, that's still like on the topic of competitive tournaments.
Yeah. I was very good at marching, not so good at playing the flute. When it comes to board games, the only real tournament stuff I do nowadays is we actually, in our Discord, we have a couple people who very kindly every now and then will set up tournaments on Board Game Arena, private tournaments, and put the link in our Discord, and then maybe in a couple other friendly folks' Discords as well. So then we just do some tournament-style games on Board Game Arena, where you play through a match, and then you play through another, and another, and another, and then you get points based on how you place in each match, and then at the end, whoever has the most points wins. You don't get anything real world out of it, it's just for fun. I really enjoy those because if it's a game I know well, then it kind of lets me hone my skills, and I'll also join tournaments for games that I don't know as well, because the multiple games gives me the opportunity to kind of dig in deeper to a game that I'm interested in. So, yeah, I really appreciate the people who set those up in our Discord, and I love participating in them.
Yeah, that sounds like the type of tournament I would enjoy more if I liked playing online, because, yeah, there's no real-world prize or anything. I think the real-world prize is part of what makes it so stressful. It's like, oh, I want to get that playmat, or I want to win that thing, and it's like, oh, I was so close. So, yeah, not having the real-world prize makes it more like playing a normal board game, like a board game night, but just making it a tournament for fun. So those can be fun.
Absolutely. We would love to hear from you all. What board game tournaments you've taken part in over the years? Please drop us a note on social media or in the Blitz Discord. Let us know what tournaments you've played and what tournaments you want to play going forward. And who knows, maybe we will see you at a tournament in the future.
And that's it for this week's Board Game Blitz. Visit our website, boardgameblitz.com, for more content and links. This episode was sponsored by Grey Fox Games. Get ready for 2 new games and 1 exciting campaign. Grey Fox Games will soon be kickstarting 2 new small box games set in the expansive world of Midgard. Clans of Midgard, a draft, write, and fight game, and Reavers of Midgard, the card game, which is a simultaneous action selection and negotiation game. And don't forget that as a Blitzketeer, you can get 10% off your entire order at greyfoxgames.com, including promos, exclusives, and upgrades not available anywhere else by using the code BGBLITZ2023 at checkout. Join the Blitzketeer community on Discord for game nights, discussions, and more by following the link in the show notes. Support the show by leaving us a rating and review on iTunes or Spotify. And if you like us a lot and want to support us monetarily and get some cool perks, check out our Ko-fi at ko-fi.com/boardgameblitz today. Our theme song was composed by Andrew Morrow. Until next time, it's the wood of the maple, it's the thrill of game night, rising up to the challenge of my rivals. Bye, everyone!
Bye!
Before we talk about the games we've played recently, I have an announcement to make. TLN, whoops. I hit the microphone with my hand gesture.
Yeah, I love, it's funny because those types of bloopers, there's no like people aren't watching because we don't do video. So like, he was like, TLN, whoops.
All right, start over.
So I wanted to talk about it because I don't know. And that I don't have anything else. Hello and welcome. Oh no.
What happened?
I don't know. Hello!
Can you do the hello again? You can say ahoy again.
Oh, I should do ahoy. We haven't had a good ahoy in a while. I don't know why the word hello sometimes is just like impossible for me to say normally. Ahoy! Oh, pip pip cheerio, Blitzketeers. All right, we can do this.